I've been happily married for 5 years, living with my thoughtful husband. We shared a close bond, eagerly anticipating the arrival of children, though we haven't had any yet. However, life took an unexpected turn following a recent incident, and I feel compelled to share this remarkable story. My husband is universally regarded as kind, a sentiment echoed by both my parents, who hold him in high esteem. My sister, a dedicated career woman, has always focused primarily on her work, but she and my husband got along well despite her typically reserved demeanor. Recently, his work responsibilities intensified dramatically. He began returning home late and even started working on his scheduled days off. As a new team leader, he was often glued to his cell phone, coordinating with his team at all hours. While some might have found his sudden change in routine suspicious, I saw it as a commitment to his job, worrying instead about the toll it was taking on his health. Amid these changes, my sister decided to relocate for a new job opportunity that required her to furnish her new apartment. I planned to drive her to the furniture store on Saturday to help her out, but an unexpected call from my boss required my immediate presence at work, leaving me in a bind. Thankfully, that Saturday was one of my husband's rare days off. Despite his recent busyness, he graciously offered to help when he saw my predicament. It was slightly awkward for him to spend the day alone with my sister, but he agreed and even asked to borrow my car since his was in the shop. Grateful for his kindness, I went to handle the emergency at work. This was the first time my husband and sister had spent time together without me, and as I dealt with my responsibilities, I couldn't help but wonder how they were managing on their own. I hoped they were making the most of their unexpected day together and finding everything my sister needed for her new place. After resolving the issues at work, it was already dark by the time I checked my phone, planning to meet my husband and sister for dinner. However, I was caught off guard by a call from an unknown number. The voice on the other end asked if I was a family member of David. Confused, I confirmed my identity as his wife. That's when the police officer delivered the shocking news. My husband had been in a car accident, and both he and his passenger, my sister, were unconscious. In a blur, I rushed to the hospital. Upon arriving at the emergency department, I gave my name and was quickly escorted to the intensive care unit. Through the glass, I could see my husband surrounded by machines, his body covered in bandages. My heart sank as I stood there, anxious about what the future held for him. Later that night, my mother arrived from far away to support us through this ordeal. As we waited anxiously, a police officer provided more details about the accident. He explained that David had been driving on a well-lit road when another car, which had run a red light, struck his vehicle. The driver of that car was also seriously injured and receiving treatment at the same hospital. However, this driver claimed that David's car had been behaving erratically before the crash, leading the police to investigate whether he might have fallen asleep at the wheel. After several tense days, both my husband and sister regained consciousness, and the doctors began conducting several tests. When my mother and I were called in for the results, the doctors delivered some difficult news. While they assured us that David and my sister would survive, they warned us that both might face lasting disabilities. Despite this grim prognosis, my mother and I felt relieved that they were alive. We clung to the hope that with rehabilitation, they could recover to some degree. Choosing to focus on the positive, we decided not to share the potential long-term impacts of their injuries with them. Instead, we surrounded them with encouragement and care, grateful for their survival. My mother took on the role of caring for my sister while I dedicated myself to looking after my husband. In the early days after the accident, he was visibly shaken, struggling both emotionally and physically. He was deeply troubled, not just by his own condition but also by the impact the accident had on all of us. As time passed, the man who had always been gentle and kind began to change. Frustration took hold, particularly regarding his impaired mobility and the ongoing medical treatments he faced. The reality of having to leave his job weighed heavily on his mind, and despite my efforts to support him, his irritability grew. I continued to visit him regularly at the hospital, determined to be there for him. During one of these visits, a police detective approached me with new information about the accident. He explained that there had been a leak in the brake oil of my car, likely contributing to the vehicle's erratic behavior before the crash. This revelation suggested that an accident might have been inevitable, either for me or someone else. Additionally, I learned that the woman who had crashed into us was also suffering. Her mother approached me to apologize, marking our first encounter since the incident. As days turned into weeks, my husband's frustration escalated. He grew increasingly resentful of my mobility and independence, angered by the contrast between our situations. His frustration often manifested in demanding behavior and outbursts of anger when I couldn't meet his needs as quickly or fully as he wanted. Objects were thrown, and harsh words exchanged over minor issues, such as my decision to step out to buy lunch. The demands and complaints grew more frequent and intense, adding to the strain of our situation. I empathized deeply with my husband's pain and frustration, but the reality of our situation required me to balance my time between supporting him and fulfilling my responsibilities. I needed to work to support us financially, stay updated on the police investigation, and coordinate with the hospital regarding his care. Despite the challenges and his occasional outbursts, I remained committed to helping him through his recovery, hoping that with time, patience, and care, we could navigate this difficult period together. However, I barely had a moment to myself anymore. My husband's demeanor had become increasingly difficult to manage, leaving me feeling cornered by the escalating tensions. Similarly, my sister was grappling with her own frustrations, and our mother appeared visibly worn out from the strain. I learned that my sister was placing even heavier demands on our mother, who was already stretched thin from not working and caring for both of us. Whenever I couldn't visit the hospital, both my husband and sister became more despondent, hearing from doctors that they might remain paralyzed despite ongoing rehabilitation efforts added to the stress. The issue of my car's brake oil leak soon came to a head. My sister confronted me, her tone accusatory. "I heard your car was leaking oil. You were supposed to maintain it. Because of your negligence, I can't work or return to normal. Mom's stressed and your husband is suffering. You're going to have to take care of us for the rest of your life." Her harsh words took me by surprise, prompting me to call our mother, who confessed that my sister had been in a distressed mental state for quite some time. Despite the tension, my concern for my husband drove me to the hospital, only to find that he was not in his room. I eventually found my husband in the common room, quietly sitting with my sister. The visiting hours were about to end, leaving them alone in the otherwise empty space. It was there that my husband coldly remarked, "If you had just taken the car in for inspection, maybe none of this would have happened." His glare was piercing as he added, "Yeah, and now you're the reason your sister and I are in this mess. The insurance will cover some of it, but you'll be taking care of us for the rest of your lives. Remember that." His words struck me like a punch, igniting a surge of emotions within me. Surprised and hurt, I responded, "Since when have you become so close to my sister?" "What do you mean by that?" He shot back, "You don't come around often, and your mom even texted your sister to visit since we're both stuck here and can't walk. What's wrong with talking to your husband?" The situation felt overwhelming, and it was clear that the stress and fear of our new reality were profoundly affecting everyone's emotions and actions. Feeling increasingly isolated, I sensed my husband and sister were aligning against me. With a hint of sarcasm, I tried to lighten the mood. "Right, you two haven't spent much time together before the accident, have you?" Ignoring my tone, my husband replied, "What are you talking about? We're discussing you taking care of us. And you know that." My sister avoided my gaze but nodded in agreement, as if to confirm their expectation of my lifelong support. I hadn't anticipated a straightforward answer from either of them, but I pressed on, hoping to make them see my perspective. Switching topics, I casually mentioned, "I wonder how the person who hit your car is doing now." "How should I know?" My sister retorted defensively. "She hit us when the light was red. It's just unbelievable." "That's right. You can't imagine how terrifying it was," my husband chimed in. "We need to make sure we get compensation from her. I was so close to getting a promotion too." As their complaints continued, I realized it was time to clarify some facts. "There's something you both need to know. First off, I had my car inspected just before the accident," I said. "Oh, did you? Then the dealer should be sued. There's no way they didn't know the brake fluid was leaking." My sister quickly interjected. "That's right," I agreed. "After the accident, the police contacted me to examine the car and determine the cause. They wanted to check my drive recorder, but that old recorder doesn't capture sound and doesn't start recording right after an accident, so it's not very useful." My husband dismissed my explanation. "That's where you're wrong," I corrected him gently. "You didn't know that I replaced the old drive recorder with a new one, did you?" My sister looked up in surprise. "What?" "I also installed an additional camera inside the car," I continued. Her face grew increasingly pale as I spoke. The new drive recorders can start recording with even the slightest shake of the car. The police have already contacted me about the data they've obtained. My husband's expression shifted to confusion, while my sister appeared so pale that she looked ready to collapse. Facing them directly, I confronted her. You were up to something, weren't you? What exactly did you do to the car? Why are you addressing my sister like that? My husband panicked, his voice shaky as he grappled with the implications of my words. You talked to her as if she were your girlfriend. I reminded him. I told you that a slag vibration would activate the recording, and it captured many intimate moments between you two. My words left him speechless, and the color drained from his face as I revealed how the police had inquired about the woman in the car with him. It was painfully clear now. His affair with my sister had been exposed. You've been deceiving me all this time. I confronted them, the revelation hitting hard. My husband, cornered and desperate, began to deflect blame onto my sister. Linda isn't the only one at fault here, he stammered. Just then, the mother of the woman who crashed into my car entered the room. I had invited her, hoping for some resolution or understanding. Don't you have anything to say to her? I challenged my sister, who recoiled at the sight of the distraught woman. Wow, who's this? My sister exclaimed, taken aback. She's the mother of the woman who crashed into you, I explained, my voice steady despite the emotional turmoil swirling inside me. My husband fell silent, finally realizing who she was as I continued, and she's also the mother of Marilyn, the woman who was your victim. At the mention of the name Marilyn, both my husband and sister went pale, panic washing over their faces. What is this? Do you know the woman who was driving the car? My sister demanded, her voice trembling with shock and confusion. My husband, at a loss for words, looked utterly defeated. That's when I decided to lay everything bare. She was having an affair with David. He promised her a divorce but never followed through. When Marilyn falsely claimed she was pregnant to manipulate him, David told her to get an abortion and cut off contact. Devastated and seeking revenge, Marilyn targeted me, aiming to hurt me through you. I connected the dots of this malicious cycle spurred by deceit and betrayal. So you were just in the wrong place at the wrong time, I concluded, the weight of the situation settling over us. I can't believe something like this has upended our lives, my sister murmured, the magnitude of the betrayal dawning on her. I looked at them, my voice quiet but firm. No matter how much you cry or scream now, it changes nothing. This tragedy wasn't the result of an innocent bystander's actions. It was woven through a web of lies and vengeance that you both were part of. The room fell silent, the harsh truth echoing among us as we faced the painful consequences of their actions. Pouring all my emotions into my words, I made sure they understood the gravity of what had happened. You were carrying on an affair behind my back, and Linda, you tampered with the brake fluid of my car, intending to hurt me. Yet ironically, you ended up in the accident yourself. I am the true victim in this mess, I explained, bitterness clear in my voice as I revealed the depth of my disillusionment. I had contemplated not pursuing a divorce if you had shown even a hint of remorse during your hospital stay and honestly explained everything. However, you never once expressed any regret. Instead, you treated me with contempt. Pausing to let that sink in, I reminded them, do you remember how we jokingly filled out those divorce papers right after we got married? I never thought I'd actually use them, but today I filed them. So, you're no longer married. This is goodbye. With that, I left the dark, quiet hospital, feeling a profound sense of liberation, expressing all the pent-up resentment had freed me in a way I anticipated. Yet the aftermath of this revelation was not without its consequences. My mother was deeply shocked by the entire ordeal. The betrayal by my sister pained her, and the realization that she would have to care for her physically disabled daughter alone was overwhelming. While I had severed my ties with David and Linda, I couldn't bear to leave my mother to handle everything on her own. To help alleviate some of the burden, I approached the woman responsible for the accident, facilitating the necessary apologies and discussions about compensation, ensuring my sister, who was inadvertently involved, would be taken care of financially. This was the least I could do to prevent my mother from being overly burdened. 3 years have passed since that tumultuous time. My ex-husband and I are now divorced, and I've moved on. But the scars from those revelations and the weight of my decisions linger, a constant reminder of the complexities of relationships and the unexpected turns life can take. Now, I'm living on my own. During my marriage, David and I were perceived as a close couple, so our divorce shocked my coworkers. Afterward, I noticed an increase in attention from male colleagues, which I attributed to the notion that divorced women might appear more approachable or intriguing to some men. Despite this newfound attention, the lingering image of my ex-husband made dating unappealing to me. Instead of pursuing romantic relationships, I channeled my energies into advancing my career. I diligently studied for a certification exam and enrolled in an online business school that I could attend after work. I had never envisioned myself pursuing such a path. I never envied my sister, the career woman, and never thought I'd aspire to be one. Yet there I was, naturally gravitating toward this new goal. Life certainly has its twists. Since then, my ex-husband has moved back in with his parents, but it seems he has become a burden to them. His relatives blame him for his poor behavior and the way he treated me, and I've heard he's not doing well mentally. He's been acting out violently, causing trouble for those around him. My sister also returned to her parents' home, but her mental state has deteriorated further, and she continues to exhibit selfish behaviors. My mother, worn out from the ordeal, used my sister's savings and the accident compensation to place her in a care home. She consulted me before making this decision, and seeing no reason to object, I told her to do whatever she felt was necessary. Navigating these changes, I learned to adapt and focus on my personal growth, realizing that sometimes the most challenging situations lead to unexpected paths and new beginnings. At one point, I feared I would end up caring for both of them for the rest of my life, a prospect that felt like servitude. However, everything changed when I passed the certification exam I had been working toward. This achievement led to a transfer to a department where I could effectively utilize my new skills. During this period of professional growth, I grew close to the instructor of the online business school I attended. Soon, we began to plan a future together. Unlike my past relationship, he isn't just kind to everyone, he shows a special kindness toward me. For instance, if I'm working late, he makes it a point to come home early and prepare dinner for us. This thoughtful gesture means the world to me, and I've come to cherish these moments of simple happiness. Now, as I head home after a long day, I often find myself smiling at the thought of seeing him. I look up at the stars, grateful for the turn my life has taken, and feel eager to return to the warm home we've built together.